Sometimes it takes a little while for influencers to become apparent in wrestling. It can be a generational thing. It can be something where people may even mock it at first, but then a few years down the road, well, everyone's doing it. That's kind of the case with what I'm looking at today. KENTA and Naomichi Marufuji in the mid-2000s, back when they were a pioneering Noah Junior tag team and rivals from a new generation, doing things that no one else was doing in a big ring against each other, and eventually facing off for the GHC Heavyweight title on the 29th of October 2006. It was something different right from the get-go, not least because these two wrestlers weren't traditional heavyweights at all, and yet they made it to the top. Some people loved their matches immediately, calling them some of the best that had ever been seen in a Noah ring, while others were less effusive about the new style that these two represented. But here, nearly 20 years down the road, it's impossible to deny the impact that these two had. The work that KENTA and Naomichi Marufuji did, both as a team and as singles rivals, changed the way people wrestled. It's a match that happened at a rather delicate time for pro wrestling Noah, and it didn't necessarily get the response that Noah wanted in 2006, but in 2025 this contest is undoubtedly the stuff of legend. So, let's get started. The careers of KENTA and Naomichi Marufuji basically go hand in hand. Marufuji, an All Japan Dojo graduate who trained under Mitsuharu Misawa himself, is a couple of years older and thus was the first to debut proper in 1998. And, as was the norm, he'd largely spend those first couple of years on the losing side in singles, mostly against Yoshinobu Kanemaru, a 1996 debutant. Wins were hard to come by, and during the All Japan years they usually only came against fellow 1998 debutant Makoto Hashi, and then, on May 24, 2000, against a guy making his All Japan singles debut, Kenta Kobayashi, who was trained by Kenta Kobashi and Yoshihiro Takayama. These two youngsters were clearly earmarked from the off as having potential considering just who trained them, and following the big split in 2000, it wasn't too long before Kobayashi and Marufuji were put together again. Their first singles match in Noah happened on the 16th of September. Here, on one of the company's first shows, Marufuji largely has the advantage based on his seniority, although the pair are still slowly finding their characters. Kobayashi is most definitely still in young lion mode, but he does make a fine account of himself only a few months after his debut, catching Marufuji out with a few decent moves here and there, even though ultimately it's Marufuji who gets the expected win, hitting a backdrop straight into a jackknife hold for the pin. It's still early days, but there's a lot of respect afterwards, and you kinda know that we're going to be seeing these two guys with each other for some time to come. The next couple of years sees the pair find their characters and their styles. We start to see the brash nature and hard kicks of Kenta Kobayashi, soon restyled as simply Kenta, and the more stoic Marufuji's supreme speed and technical brilliance. Largely, they do this apart from each other. They did actually team for a few matches in 2001, but we're not quite at Kenta Maru's stage yet. We also have another little singles match between the pair from May of 2001. It's a quick sprint, and it's another affair where Kenta does get a few good bits of offense in, but Marufuji is largely in control throughout. He hits a couple of the super kicks that he'd soon be famous for, and ultimately finishes Kenta with a newer move called the Shiranui, one that Marufuji innovated and would be imitated by many others. There's success too, mainly for Marufuji, who won his first, and surprisingly only, GHC Junior Heavyweight title in December of 2001. When he had to vacate the belt due to a knee injury, it gave Kenta a chance to really make a name for himself, reaching the final of a tournament for the title in May of 2002, losing in a very close-run match against Yoshinobu Kanemaru. Still, these two wrestlers are going to make even more of a name for themselves when they're paired up with each other, and the chance for that comes when Noah decides to introduce tag team titles for the junior division. The tournament for the inaugural champions sees Kenta and Marufuji defeat the older guard of Mitsuo Momota and Tsuyoshi Kikuchi, 0-1's Tatsuhito Takaiwa and Yoshihito Sasaki, before defeating New Japan's Jushin Thunder Liger and Osaka Pro's Takehiro Murahama in a marvellous final to become the first champions, and they're going to hold on to these belts for the next 690 days. Whether they were defending the belts or not, it wasn't uncommon during this time for Kenta and Marufuji, usually just known as Kenta Maru, to steal the show with their bouts, to the point where their defences would often be the main event in venues like the Green Dome in Sapporo or Noah's home base at Diffa Ariake in Tokyo. One particular opponent of theirs was always guaranteed to bring the house down. Ricky Marvin, another one of Noah's junior stars during this period, would try and wrestle the titles away from Kenta Maru 3 times, partnering first with Juventud Guerrera and then with Noah's firstborn Kotaro Suzuki and Suwa, and each time out the resulting match ended up being phenomenal, the sort of wild and fast-paced junior bouts that tear the house down, the sort of thing that you would struggle to see in other big companies, and the sort of thing that made Noah, amongst the big 3 Puro companies, New Japan, All Japan and LEM at least, the place to watch really exciting junior wrestling, surpassing New Japan's efforts from the era. As we get into the mid-2000s, it seems as though this duo are clearly going to be a big part of Noah's future for many years to come. They're 2 of the company's youngest stars, and they've got a hell of a lot of momentum. Still, if they want to get to the top, there is an obvious glass ceiling they're going to have to break, in that they're both very much juniors. Kenta is £187 and Marufuji is £198. Featuring junior wrestling was a big part of Noah, something that made them very different from the old All Japan where juniors barely got a look in. And yet there is still a lot of separation between the juniors and the traditional big guys. For all of Kenta Maru's success, they only ever had one crack at the main GHC tag titles in their heyday on 25th April 2004. It was a great match and a monster of an effort, but they ultimately came up short against Mitsuharu Misawa and Yoshinari Ogawa. There's a great interview with the team from 2003, just after they won the junior tag titles, that's been translated into English by Hisame at Noah's Archive. In the interview, Kenta refers to himself as being part of the Matsuzaka generation, a reference to the baseball pitcher Daisuke Matsuzaka, who was a young ace pitcher in Nippon professional baseball at the time. A lot of pundits used to refer to potentially hot NPB players who'd been born between April 1980 and April 1981 as part of the Matsuzaka generation, and Kenta fell into this bracket. Marufuji cuts a determined tone at the end of the interview. He says that the Kenta and Marufuji generation of wrestlers have to grow quickly or the industry will have no future. These words may be worth coming back to later. Gradually the opportunities do come for these young hotheads to go against those established seniors, and sometimes these opportunities bring success. While we're naturally going to talk about Kenta's trial series again in a bit, it's also worth noting that on October 16, 2004, Naomichi Marufuji defeated Jun Akiyama by countout to win the GHC Hardcore Openweight Championship. A countout victory that was seen as quite the shocking upset, one that was achieved after the two went outside, Marufuji managed to hit a Shiranui onto the floor, and Akiyama couldn't get to the ring in time. Marufuji would hold the title for a good few months and make a couple of defences against fellow young star Go Shiozaki and grizzled old git Haruka Aigen before losing it to Muhammad Yone. It's not a major title, but it's certainly a significant victory. And then, of course, you've got Kenta's 2004 trial matches. Now, this sort of trial series was once a rite of passage for any highly promising talent, usually coming a couple of years into their career. Kenta Kobashi had such a series in January of 1990, for example. Whilst Kenta was already 4 years in and probably should have already had his series of trials by now, he earned it through his incredible performances with Marufuji, and perhaps it also made a nice parallel seeing as Kobashi, his trainer and mentor, had previously had one of the more famous trial series. Back in 1990, Kobashi faced off against some majorly tough and hardened foes, losing against Yoshiaki Yatsu, Great Kabuki, Davey Boy Smith, Jumbo Tsuruta and Abdullah the Butcher, but also winning against Randy Rose and Rip Rogers. The Kenta trial series is even tougher on paper, although he does start it with a win on January 17, 2004 against Juventud Guerrera. However, he does lose the next 5 matches, all of which are against big names. He loses in succession to Yoshinari Ogawa, Jun Akiyama, Yoshihiro Takayama, Mitsuharu Misawa and Kenta Kobashi. Basically, he faces all 5 people who have either previously held the GHC Heavyweight title, or, in the case of Kobashi, was the then reigning champion. Still, there's big moments indeed in these matches, particularly Kenta's debut of the Go to Sleep, which he used to come incredibly close to upsetting Misawa in their trial match, and from there debuting the absolutely brutal inverted Go to Sleep on Kobashi, again nearly defeating him. And then, on the 14th of November, we get to the final trial match, one that might be the toughest of all, and yet also the closest, seeing as it's against his tag team partner. Naomichi Marufuji is Kenta's last trial, and it's most certainly a match worth running through. Much more than their first meetings in 2000, this is the contest that sets a template for all that's to follow. This final trial match starts off expectedly hot. No feeling out is needed, it's just slaps. Marufuji and Kenta are in the middle of the ring, paintbrushing each other's faces like they're starring in a New Order video. Marufuji is certainly Kenta's superior whenever things do get technical or go to the ground, but Kenta's kickboxing base makes his strikes lethal, especially his kicks, which are naturally vicious and often quite creative. Against someone like Marufuji, they need to be. There's a lot of big impacts right from the off. Marufuji hits a sunset bomb on Kenta to the outside, and one particularly nasty kick sends Naomi flying right as he's about to try an Asai moonsault. The brash character of Kenta also shines through. I love it when he's got Marufuji in the tree of woe laying kicks in, then turning to argue with the ref so that he can backheel him a bit. We get a little duel on the apron. Marufuji intercepts Kenta with a super kick and tries for a Shiranui, but Kenta blocks, is eventually able to drape Maru on the ropes, hit a whopper of a knee, and then plant him with that beautiful springboard swan dive dropkick. Maru's no slouch though. He captures one of Kenta's kicks, hits the suplex, then comes off the top with an absolute beaut of a frog splash for a near fall. We get a super kick and a Shiranui attempt, but Kenta's able to reverse this one and hit a tombstone. Soon after, he gets the advantage in another corner exchange, taking Maru down with a big kick and hitting a tiger suplex for another close call. Kenta does go for the inverted go to sleep, and while Marufuji avoids it, he gets stuck in another tree of woe, and Kenta proceeds to take a leaf out of Naomi's own book, hitting a huge coast to coast dropkick. Awesome moments like this come thick and fast, but this and a whopper of a Busaiku knee are still not enough to put Marufuji away. We get close to the finish, and Kenta tries to lock in the go to sleep. However, Marufuji reverses, super kicks, and finally nails the Shiranui. He instinctively knows that this by itself will not be enough, so he picks Kenta up and goes for another. Kenta gets out of it and tries a German, Naomi flips out, super kick, goes for it again, and Kenta reverses into the go to sleep. Stunning stuff. There is nothing whatsoever between these two. After a ridiculously close near fall, we go to the corner again where Maru prepares something big. Kenta nearly responds by locking in another go to sleep, but Maru gets out and dragon screws Kenta off the top, followed by a nasty basement dropkick from the top rope. Still not enough. Naomi gets Kenta up to the top again, clearly trying to go for the Shiranui Kai. He almost does, but they lose balance and we do get a rather nasty tumble to the outside. Yeah, this is a botch, of course. It's kind of one of those that almost works in the sense of the match being so intense up to this point. We get back in, there's another strike exchange, Marufuji winning it with another super kick. He takes Kenta up again and this time, there's no mistake. Marufuji hits the incredible Shiranui Kai, a picture perfect Spanish fly, and gets the 3 count after 22-23. Kenta's trial series is over. and this last match was the best match. The first truly important singles match between Kenta and Marufuji, one that comes right in the middle of their tag team run and shows that surely, for both of these guys, tag team wrestling and indeed the whole junior division is far beyond the limit of their talents and ambitions. They undeniably tore the white-hot Korakuen Hall down with this match. Something about this venue is always special, and here it plays host to a glimpse of Noah's future, a time when these guys are going to be facing each other with so many more marbles on the line. As we go through 2005, the profile of Kenta Maru only gets higher, although it's more for their work away from each other as opposed to their junior tag belts, which do become something of an afterthought. Indeed, they didn't defend the belts in 2005 until the 5th of June, when they finally lost them to the team of Yoshinobu Kanemaru and Takashi Sugiura. Clearly they've grown beyond these titles, and it's time for something new. For Marufuji, something new represents him making purposeful strides towards the heavyweight division. Just 2 weeks after losing the junior tag straps, Marufuji wins the regular GHC tag titles on the 18th of June, teaming up with Minoru Suzuki and defeating Doug Williams and Scorpio at an FWA show in the UK. They'll hold on to these belts for 4 months before dropping them to Muhammad Yone and Takeshi Morishima. For Kenta, something new represents him finally ascending to the top of the junior division. He defeats Yoshinobu Kanemaru on the 18th of July at Destiny inside the Tokyo Dome to win the GHC Junior Heavyweight title in another excellent bout, and Kenta's reign will see plenty more fantastic duels. We've already covered his first major defence and feud against the kin hell heel that is Suwa in the past, and their match on the 18th of September is honestly one of my favourite bouts of all time. Kenta's work isn't just making huge waves in Japan, of course. The IWC of the time are most certainly eating up lots of Finn's Noah, and that includes everything Kenta and Marufuji, but I would definitely say that, at least in the circles I was running about in, Kenta was largely the people's favourite of the two, and there was a lot of clamour for him to come and do some big matches outside of Japan. Sure enough, Ring of Honor would be happy to provide. Kenta made his ROH debut on the 17th of December at the year-end final battle show, defending his GHC Junior Heavyweight title against Low Ki in another absolute stunner of a bout, one that honestly wasn't far away from the other big Noah to ROH excursion of the year, that being Kenta Kobashi's match with Samoa Joe. In a near half-hour match that was naturally filled to the brim with some of the most vicious and yet beautiful kicks ever seen in a wrestling ring up to that point, Kenta retained his strap, and Low Ki had his final classic ROH bout. The big question then is, who's ahead? It's hard to say. The junior division is now indisputably Kenta's house, but Marufuji is slowly starting to get a foothold in the heavyweight division. Meanwhile, Kenta Maru is still a Finn even if they aren't competing for the junior tag titles anymore. They do still regularly team in the rest of 2005 and 2006, they're wrestling against more and more heavyweight opponents, and often they're winning. The likes of Mitsuharu Misawa, Jun Akiyama, Kenta Kobashi and Akira Taue all eat losses to the Kenta Maru team, although they're often paired up with other juniors and undercard guys. It's a good time for the two to face off again, to see just where we're at, and happily that's what we get. Kenta defends his junior title against Marufuji on January 22nd, 2006 at the Budokan in the semi-main event. Marufuji may be slowly heading away from the juniors, but facing off against Kenta is certainly not something Maru's going to pass up, and it's about that promises a hell of a lot. We get an ultra-fast exchange of holds, arm drags and big kick attempts to kick Finns off, that classic junior standoff sort of Finn, and it's followed up by the more traditional struggle to the ropes, Kenta going first and hitting a dry slap after breaking off from Maru. More whopping slaps between the pair follow, and you can feel the rivalry taking over. It's clear that these two won't be holding back. Marufuji opts to ground Finns, and while he does have a wrestling advantage over Kenta, the champ's soon able to pick himself up, get Naomi to the corner and unleash more strikes, a double arm suplex, and some more nasty hits in the ground including a back heel, followed by the good old arrogant pin. The champ has most certainly got some swagger, and exchanging strikes with him really isn't somewhere Marufuji wants to be. The punishment continues outside and inside, with Kenta draping Maru across the ropes, landing kicks and the big slap across the back of the head. We get more slaps, kicks and a soul butt. Kenta puts Marufuji in a camel clutch and exposes his hairline, hits the old tornado rope clothesline. The champ is most certainly in control, but Marufuji does outwit him on the apron, opting to baseball slide the standing Kenta and taking out his leg. From here, Maru unleashes some serious punishment to the left knee, a knee breaker to the post, an exquisitely aimed kick on the guardrail, a dragon screw in the ropes, another really nasty one off the buckle, and it all leads up to a proper Muta-style figure 4 leg lock. It can't get the tap, but Marufuji's legwork is savage, and it helps him get an advantage in the striking. However, Kenta does manage to respond, countering a running Naomi with a power slam. As awesome as said legwork from Marufuji was, Kenta does quickly manage to find his legs again once he gets back into the match, running, hitting more kicks, including the springboard dropkick, Kawado-esque boots in the corner and a fisherman buster. Maru gets back in by making Kenta spill to the outside, and from there he hits his fantastic dropkick over the ropes to the floor. Wild but gorgeous stuff. Now with the advantage, Naomi hits his big back elbows in the corner and follows with the backdrop into jackknife that actually pinned Kenta in their first to know about. It doesn't here, but it's a nice callback. A Marufuji superkick gets blocked, a suplex is reversed and Naomi tries for the Shiranui, but ends up getting blasted with a kick on the ropes followed by a Death Valley bomb. Both guys are starting to pull out all the stops, and Marufuji responds to eating another kick by surprising the champ with his own move, the Busaiku knee. We head outside and Maru looks for an Asai moonsault, but Kenta kicks him and hits another Death Valley bomb on the floor. Another big swan dive dropkick soon follows, but Maru G's up again after flipping out of a tiger suplex, getting the near fall with a straitjacket suplex. He looks for something on the top, but Kenta rises up, does the Shelton Benjamin leap from the ring to the top, and hits an awesome avalanche Falcon Arrow for a really close fall. We're starting to get close to the finishing stretches. Kenta hits his signature strike combination and goes for the knee, but while he blocks a superkick, Maru flips out of a German and finally hits a couple of superkicks. First time in the match, believe it or not. However, a Shiranui attempt is blocked and Kenta nails his tiger suplex. The pair are battering each other now, but Maru never forgets technique. He reverses another knee attempt and almost gets the win with a roll into the Australian-style tiger suplex. Kenta comes back with a turnbuckle powerbomb followed by an alley-oop, but then just about gets runed out of the ring on a second bomb attempt. Little sketchy, but no matter. We get serious Abanai action on the apron. Maru goes for a Shiranui, Kenta tries for a German, and Maru is finally able to nail a superkick and hit that Shiranui from the apron all the way to the floor. Huge move at this stage. With Kenta only just getting back in for the count, Maru does a huge springboard coast-to-coast dropkick on the grounded champ and follows with a Bloody Sunday DDT. Kenta just gets his shoulder up. Maru can taste victory, but it's going to need something big. He tries to position Kenta for the avalanche Shiranui. Just when he thinks he has it, Kenta reverses for a backdrop, but Marufuji flips out, sending Kenta crashing, and he hits two superkicks followed by a regular Shiranui. Amazingly, that's not enough. Marufuji tries next for the Shiranui Kai that defeated Kenta last time out, but again, just when he thinks he's got it, Kenta comes back and hits an absolutely gigantic avalanche fisherman buster. Eventually, once they recover, we get the decisive strikes. Forget slaps and kicks, list evolves into pure punches. Super kick, roundhouse, back kick. The bombs land thick and heavy, but a soul butt and two more head kicks allow Kenta to, at last, hit the Busaiku knee. But Maru kicks out. Kenta gets up, calls for the end and hits the go to sleep. But it's not the end. Somehow the challenger is still here. Kenta hits a whopper of a knee in the ropes, charges right up and hits the most vicious Busaiku knee seen so far. And that is it. Kenta has defended his junior title, defeating his partner and main rival Naomichi Marufuji in just 41 seconds shy of half an hour. Needless to say, those ice packs are well needed. This match is pretty bloody fabulous, of course. It's not perfect, but it's still a hell of a watch the whole way through. There are certainly things that could be quibbled with. I do really like Marufuji's less traditional and more showy work on Kenta's left knee, but it is kind of forgotten almost as soon as Kenta starts coming back in, running about and throwing those legs pretty much as normal. It's not a major flaw, although it's the sort of thing I could see people having a go at. Some things are less prominent now than they were back then. For instance, Marufuji was the original super kick meme guy, the person who, if you heard some people speak about him, you'd think threw nothing but super kicks. And revisiting this, there's actually a lot less of those kicks than I was expecting. He doesn't even start hitting them until we get close to the finish. I guess years of the Young Bucks and the like have made Naomi look positively frugal in comparison, but he was arguably the guy who really lit the fuse on the super kick as a transitional move. Not to mention as well that these were the guys who really lit the fuse on sometimes doing ridiculous moves for little other reason aside from them looking really damn freaking cool. A Shiranui from the apron to the floor may not necessarily be the most sensible move of all time, but it sure is fun. On the whole, this is a damn fun match so long as you do leave a lot of questions you may have about psychology, selling and storytelling at the door. As I recall, it wasn't necessarily a match that I remember getting universal acclaim at the time. The most positive notes, including those from Big Man Melts in The Observer, compared Kenta and Marufuji to a modern day Tiger Mask and Dynamite Kid, saying that these guys were writing a new book on what was possible in the ring and in junior wrestling. And they were most certainly right on that front, considering how influential their work together was. There were definitely others who couldn't get past the lack of psychology or much in the way of storytelling, and I can see that even in some of the retrospective reviews for the match on places like Scott Keith's Blog of Doom. For me, it sure as hell isn't a bad way to spend half an hour. It's a pretty damn good way in fact, although I say this in the knowledge that there's even better things to come, cause yeah, we certainly aren't done yet. It's easy to see 2006 as being the highlight of Kenta's career, especially if you were a fan of ROH back then. Kenta wrestled 10 times for the company in this phenomenal year, and every one of those matches was seriously something else. You had the three-way with Bryan Danielson and Samoa Joe, singles matches against guys like Davey Richards, Austin Aries and Matt Sydal, and indeed a spot for Marufuji with a couple of Kentamaru tag bouts, including a particularly stunning one against the Briscoes. Over the course of the year, it seemed as though out of anybody, Kenta was the guy who had Danielson's number, and was the favourite to end the American Dragon's epic title reign. Most of these matches built up to that eventual clash, which happened on September 16th at Night 2 of the Glory by Honor weekend. The result? Well, Kenta did just end up missing out, but that hardly tells the full story. This is a match I could happily talk about for an age, so I'll just say that it's something you need to watch right frickin' now if you never have, because it's one of the greatest matches in the history of the company. It's right there on YouTube as well, so there's no excuses. Possibly the best title defence from Danielson's reign, which is saying a hell of a lot. The Noah side of things are looking pretty good too, especially when you consider the match he had with his mentor on the 5th of March. Kenta gave Kobashi an absolute hell of a fight, the legend couldn't put him away, and ultimately Kobashi needed to use the Burning Hammer in order to do so. One hell of a rub to say the least. With all this said, he does lose his junior title on the 5th of June. In another tough and damn good match, the ultra-intense hard-ass Takashi Sugiura takes the gold. However, you wonder if this loss might open up opportunities elsewhere. Marufuji's progression in the heavyweight division is still happening, although not without obvious challenges. He does get a singles win against Akira Taue in March, and he has his own lengthy tussle with Kenta Kobashi in April that's not nearly as well remembered as the Kenta match, but is still worth a look. He's moving along, but now that he's largely separate from Kenta, Marufuji's work isn't necessarily producing as many big highlights as the work of his former tag partner, even if most of his singles and tag matches do see him getting the winner's money. However, well, fortunes can change quickly in the world of wrestling. On the 9th of September, Naomichi Marufuji gets a shot at the GHC Heavyweight title in the Budokan against champion Jun Akiyama. It's not exactly a match he's expected to win, but he has the chance to make a lot of history if he does. It's about full of what you would expect, big impact moves and a serious beating from Akiyama, Marufuji's speed and cunning occasionally giving him an advantage, but in the end, it's not the result you would expect. On the 27-minute mark, following a rapid exchange where many kicks are dodged and Akiyama fails to hit his stern-nest dust, Marufuji catches the champ and rolls him up with the perfect inside cradle. He's reached the top of the mountain. Naomichi Marufuji is the new GHC Heavyweight champion. In doing this, he became the youngest GHC champ and he became Noah's first Grand Slam champion. It was an absolute shock, surely the biggest in the company's history. Although it wasn't one without foreboding. You may recall that Marufuji beat Akiyama once before to win the hardcore openweight title, but more famously Akiyama's first GHC reign in 2002 ended when he was similarly outsmarted by a smaller wrestler. While Yoshinari Ogawa has largely always competed in the heavyweight division, he was also able to roll Akiyama up and win the title. Even still, it's a massive shock. Marufuji wasn't considered, at least not by people in the IWC, to be as popular as Kenta, and his results didn't point towards a forthcoming big title win. But then, these things can happen in chaotic times. We'll pick that up in a little bit. With Marufuji now holding the big title and very quickly defending it for the first time on that ROH Glory by Honor weekend in a great bout against Nigel McGuinness, there's two matches for him that make more sense than any other. The first is a bout against his mentor and trainer, Mitsuharu Misawa, of course. And the second is a bout against his longtime partner and rival. We've got to have Kenta and Naomichi Marufuji facing off against each other for the big one, main event in the Budokan. Something that should almost feel like both guys breaking through that traditional junior heavyweight class ceiling. And indeed, that's what we're going to get. Marufuji and Kenta will main event the Budokan at the end of Noah's Autumn Navigation Tour on October 29th, becoming the first two junior heavyweights to headline in the fabled arena with the big belt on the line. It's something of a historic moment, and based on the match they had earlier in the year, you already know that it's going to be all guns blazing. They've got this big shot here, and they're going to use that to have the best match they can possibly put on. Now, normally I would go through a big old recap of the match, going through all the big moves and all the big moments. However, my feeling is that with this one, such a recap may not do it the justice required. Plus there's so many moments worth highlighting in this 35-minute tussle that we'd probably be here for another half hour or more just going through them all. I know some of you would like that very much, but there are other things that need going through. The action that you can see speaks for itself. We've gone into a lot of detail for two big Kenta Maru matches, and for them this is their chance at the summit, a shot at a certain glory that folks who are their size have never gotten before, the main event at the Budokan. That said, there are a few things certainly worth highlighting, important callbacks and high wire moments. We do get a more traditional title bout beginning, a slower start that's perhaps not surprising considering just how long the pair are about to go, but it is their spin on the traditional parity between champion and challenger that you get in these bouts. Still, it's not long before the rapid fire exchanges commence, things get ever more dangerous, and we do get one particularly wild spot, Marufuji's Asai moonsault on Kenta over a freaking guardrail. This must be one of the most dangerous spots ever done in a title match, honestly, and the risk may not have been worth the reward. Marufuji doesn't quite make it over the rail, slamming his neck on it, and Kenta gets a hard way cut on the top of the head from trying to catch him. It's a spot that certainly makes you wince by any standard. We get important callbacks and ripostes from earlier bouts. Marufuji again goes for a Shiranui from the apron to the floor, but this time Kenta's able to counter, and Naomi eats a whopping Falcon Arrow to the floor instead. Another huge move. Speaking of huge moves, I don't believe anyone had kicked out of Maru's Shiranui Kai before this bout. and it had beaten Kenta before. That was his super finisher, but this time it wasn't enough to beat Kenta. And it's particularly in this moment that you wonder just how on earth the bout's actually going to finish. We'll get to that shortly. It goes without saying that the pair used this chance to put on one of the very greatest matches of their careers. Just about everything that you can imagine happening in such a bout does happen, and the pair simply don't miss at any point. The execution is perfect, but the story's up there too this time. Before I do mention the finish, I would almost encourage you to just go and watch this match for yourself right now, if you've not seen it before, to make up your own mind. While it might be hard to do this, when you watch it you've got to remember, again, I cannot stress this enough, it's totally uncharted territory. The first time two guys this size, two guys who are still very much associated with the junior division, have ever headlined a venue like the Budokan on a traditional pro-res supercard. The pro wrestling pundits at the time, that is, the ones in Japan, were pretty shocked at this main event happening at all. Sure, the smart marks like us, the Western journalists like Meltzer, Alvarez, Keller and so on, thought that Kenta and Marufuji main event in the Budokan was really damn cool. However, the pages of Weekly Gone and Weekly Pro Wrestling were much more critical, with many more questions asked about why Noah were putting such a main event on with two smaller guys, going against all the wisdom about just what the main event of a big pro-res card at the Budokan should look like. Kenta and Naomichi Marufuji answered those critics with a match that most certainly belonged at the top of the card, an epic that's still amongst the best ever GHC title matches, and ultimately about where the champion was able to defend his strap. Marufuji pinned Kenta in a glorious 35 minutes and 34 seconds to retain. In the end, Marufuji needed to introduce a new finisher, the pole shift, to finally put his rival down. This is far from the last meeting that the pair would ever have, of course, but it is still assuredly the best of them, the one where Kenta and Marufuji laid out their vision for pro-res's future. Some accepted it, many would follow it, and some didn't accept it. Now, while we can wax lyrical about this incredible bout for a long time, we do eventually have to acknowledge the cold, hard truth. Running Marufuji vs Kenta on top at the Budokan was not a good performer at the box office. In fact, it was an awful performer. While Noah announced an attendance of 15,000, that was clearly not the case. There were 11,500 people in the audience, and of those 7,000 were paid. This was a huge drop-off from the previous Budokan show where Marufuji beat Akiyama. That was 13,600 attending, although it's unknown how much of that was papered. It's a huge shame, but those are the numbers. What were the reasons behind this? Back in his report on the card, Meltzer posits that you simply can't change overnight what fans have been taught for generations, that in the end, the main event is all about the heavyweight guys. That's Japanese wrestling tradition, and in this regard pro-res and sports entertainment weren't actually a whole lot different, at least at this time in the big companies. Still, there's more to it than that. There's the big elephant with context written on it in the room, that context being the absence of the company's biggest star, Kenta Kobashi. All of this happens just after he's diagnosed with cancer in June, which puts him out of action for 18 months. The loss of Kobashi is a hammer blow that couldn't have come at a worse time, and a lot of booking decisions are knock-ons of that. If Kobashi is still there, Jun Akiyama likely does not lose the title to Marufuji. The idea of putting the belt on Akiyama in the first place seemed as though it was to build up to a decisive, possibly final battle between him and Kobashi, one where Akiyama may perhaps have finally gotten his big triumph and shown that this time he was ready to hold the strap for the long haul. But of course, all that goes out the window with Kobashi out the picture long term. There is still a chance that Marufuji would have won such a bout, when you consider challengers like him possibly being a weakness for Akiyama, when you consider that he's Misawa's protege, and when you think about Misawa's own concerns for the future and for his mortality, it's not impossible. Still, I would lean towards Akiyama beating Marufuji in a scenario where his main rival, Kobashi, isn't on the shelf. Marufuji becoming champ is an experiment that's like a shock to the system, trying to surprise folks into attention by breaking with the norm. However, it is one they already tried with Yoshinori Ogawa, and it didn't work then. But in an ideal world, Noah would have built up to the big meeting between Marufuji and Kenta a lot more. They'd have given Marufuji a chance to establish himself further and defeat other heavyweight contenders, and let everything percolate before building up to the aforementioned big meetings between Kenta and ultimately Misawa. Instead, the match was very rushed. Marufuji vs Kenta was only announced as the main event a couple of weeks before September the 9th, and I wonder how much of an effect that had. Not to mention that the rest of the card was rather weak both on paper and in execution. In short, a lot of these events are happening because things are suddenly chaotic behind the scenes. Noah are desperately looking for a solution that can fill the massive kabashi-shaped hole, and with the failure of Kentamaru on top, the next step is inevitable. On the 10th of December, in a close match with an ultimately decisive finish, Naomichi Marufuji lost his title to Mitsuharu Misawa. Noah's boss had previously chosen to take a step back from the title picture 3 years ago. He's 44 years old and utterly broken down, and he has been struck by a premonition in which his life comes to an end inside the squared circle. But with the experiment not working and other hot prospects, namely Takeshi Morishima, not deemed ready yet, Misawa takes the top spot, believing that he's the only person who can fill the role. The Marufuji Misawa title change is a legit Budokan sellout at 16,800, of course. Although it must be said that even in the Misawa reign, there are some Budokan title bouts that perform as bad, if not worse, than Marufuji and Kenta did. Some of that's down to simply not having a good enough challenger, such as Takuma Sano, while an almost surefire seller like Misawa vs Taue only drew 8,000 thanks to a massive typhoon in Tokyo, because Noah's bad luck obviously hadn't peaked yet. Indeed, it had far from peaked. In retrospect, when you look at the reign and think about how it made those tragic events of the 13th of June 2009 ever likelier, you do of course wish that Mitsuharu Misawa hadn't taken that decision, but you can understand his reasons for doing so. The Misawa reign has been covered before, of course. That video's on YouTube even if it's not on my channel, so you should look out for it for some more detail. But, well, it's a desperate struggle to say the least. Kenta vs Marufuji for the GHC Heavyweight title will always have a place in Noah's history books. It's deemed the match that broke the ice when it comes to having the juniors on the top. But for so many reasons, the people weren't quite ready yet. Both Kenta and Naomichi Marufuji were amongst Noah's youngest talents back when they headlined the Budokan, and it's interesting to compare how the pair were perceived back then to how they're perceived now. I would say that back then it appeared that most people absolutely favoured Kenta over Marufuji. His style was perfect for that time, he was seen to be the most popular, and certainly in the spots where I was kicking around, on the internet I mean, he was much better thought of. Hell, while there were people who certainly liked Marufuji, I really don't think there were that many in the IWC who preferred him to Kenta. In the eyes of the Western smarks like myself, he was always seen as number 2, and we probably thought Noah felt the same way, at least until he became the guy that won the GHC Heavyweight title. We weren't so aware back then of the little details such as A. Marufuji wasn't just Misawa's trainee, he was in the same sort of position that Misawa was with Giant Baba, in that Misawa essentially thought of Marufuji as his heir in pro wrestling. And B. Because Marufuji debuted a couple of years before Kenta, he was in the senpai position, same as Misawa was Kawada's senpai. Therefore it's virtually a certainty that Marufuji would have gotten his chance with the big strap first. Nowadays, things are different. I'm sure you would find more people who, when asked who's the better of the pair, would answer with Marufuji, perhaps more so than they'd answer with Kenta. The facts are pretty undeniable. Naomichi Marufuji has been far more successful than Kenta. He's gone on to hold the big GHC belt 4 times, the tag team titles 9 times. Oh, and nowadays he is also Noah's vice president, a role he's held since 2009, inheriting it in accordance with Mitsuharu Misawa's will. He did all of this and he never left, even during times when so many others did depart. Marufuji has long been one of the defining figures of pro wrestling Noah, perhaps only behind Kobashi and Mitsuharu Misawa himself. He's certainly got a pretty decent legacy behind him, and even if he is now 45, I'd imagine he's not quite done yet. Kenta, on the other hand, has had a bit more of a struggle. He eventually ended up getting 3 runs with the junior belt, but Kenta didn't actually win the big one in Noah until 2013, and it's fair to say that a lot of people thought he should have got that chance far sooner than he did, especially seeing as it was only a year or so before he left for the States. The injuries certainly racked up for Kenta, a lot more than they did for Marufuji, and the 5 or so years he spent in WWE world were largely ruined by him constantly being on the shelf. His arrival into New Japan in 2019 did see some highlights, particularly as a complete bastard, an almost Suwa-esque heel character, and while he would largely be a mid-card guy, Kenta was still generally pretty fun. Now, in 2025, he's left New Japan and he's come back home. He's in Noah, recently teaming with Kenoh. All is said, it could be argued that neither Kenta nor Marufuji necessarily have had the careers they should have had, considering their talent. A big chunk of their prime years were spent in darker times for pro res, and especially darker times for any company that wasn't New Japan. They were both producing fantastic work in the ring during the early 2010s, but unfortunately there wasn't a great deal of people watching it. This was the time when Noah tended to make headlines for all the wrong reasons, such as the 2012 Yakuza scandal, their mistreatment of Kenta Kobashi, the exodus of various talents, the loss of their TV deal, the misery of their one-sided partnership with New Japan. Again, Hisami has a great summary, The Green Guide to the History of Pro Wrestling Noah, on her website that I will link to in the description. Very much worth reading. One key and rather bittersweet quote from Marufuji back in this dark age sums up the struggles of these times. "We have lived too long off the accounts of our seniors, and now there is nothing left." When you look at the history of the company between the years of 2009 and 2017, it's honestly a wonder that there's still a pro wrestling Noah left at all these days, that they managed to even make it out of this period, let alone get to a stage where they've grown a significant fan base once again, gaining enough of a following to be able to return to the Budokan. Now that we're so far removed from these days, the world of pro res does look somewhat different. Kenta and Naomichi Marufuji were indeed trailblazers. There's plenty of wrestlers who've made it to the top of the mountain in their respective promotions who are of similar size to them. The likes of Will Ospreay, Zack Sabre Jr., Kaito Kiyomiya, Kenoh, Kota Ibushi, Katsuhiko Nakajima, Kento Miyahara. All of these guys are around the 200-pound mark. Generally speaking, even the heavyweights aren't exactly as heavy as they were back in the 90s or the 2000s. There's something of a sweet spot between the 100, 105 kilogram or 220 pound mark, where you find a lot of folks like Tetsuya Naito, Shinsuke Nakamura, Kenny Omega, Hiroshi Tanahashi, Jay White, Hiroki Goto, Shingo Takagi, and plenty more. And a lot of these guys went from being top of the junior division to being top of the heavyweight division, particularly talents like Ospreay, Omega, Ibushi, and Shingo. There's no longer a huge gap between the juniors and the heavyweights, and that summit feels a whole lot more reachable for juniors than it did back in the mid-noughties, let alone in the 90s when there was almost no interaction between the divisions beyond multi-man tags and the like. You do wonder how Kenta and Naomichi Marufuji would fare if their primes were happening today. One imagines they would still more than likely shine. But one part of their legacy is always assured. When they took each other on in 2006 for that big GHC belt, it may not have set the box office alight, but the end result wasn't just an all-time classic match, it was a preview of Pro Wres's future. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and until the next time, bye for now.